Hello, Cine-Files. Before we get going, I just want to let you know that we're coming very close to our 150th episode, where we're going to be doing a Q&A. If you have questions for John or I on any topic, but particularly movies, send it to the Cine-Files1941 at gmail.com. That's the Cine-Files1941, the year of Citizen Kane, at gmail.com. And now on with the show.
2 days ago, I saw a vehicle that had hauled that tanker. You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roque. I'm a voiceover artist, host, writer, producer over at Collider Video, and the co-host of the Top 10 and the Geek Buddies show.
Geek Buddies. Hey!
Acting fools every week. Come join us. Bring our numbers up, for God's sakes. Come listen to us. But that's not what we're here for.
No, what we're here for, first of all, is to introduce our very special guest, one of my oldest and dearest friends, Steve Jones. Welcome back to the Cine-Files. Steve is an animation storyboard artist, a character designer on so many important shows in animation, from Batman to Ghostbusters to King of the Hill. There's so many I could list. Teen Titans Go, Scooby-Doo. Let's see. The list goes on. There's G.I. Joe. There's... What and you're currently working? Can you share the one you're currently working on?
I think I can say I'm working on Big Mouth.
Oh, the Netflix one. Mm-hmm. Nick Kroll.
Yes,
right?
he's
awesome.
the boss. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming back to the Cine-Files.
Thank you guys for having me.
Your other Cine-Files episode has been among the #1 episodes ever on YouTube, which was 3 Days of the Condor.
Can you believe it?
I mean, I don't want to say it's because of me. I would like to say it's because of 3 Days of the Condor. But
why? Why wouldn't you want to say it's because of you?
If you look at the numbers.
I mean, I suppose we could test this out by doing 3 Days of the Condor again with another guest.
Oh,
that's true. Or you could just keep having me on the show, and if it turns out that your numbers just keep going up and up and up, you've really got to look at what's happening.
That's a fair point.
I mean, there might be just a hidden Sidney Pollack fan base out there that we never knew about.
Well, a Steve Jones fan base that we never knew about.
I like where John's head's at in this. But yeah, well, I think if you do Tootsie, that will be a good indicator.
Have we done Tootsie?
We have not. We've had requests for Tootsie.
We have.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I saw it again the other day. That movie is so damn good.
It's so goddamn good.
It really is.
But this is not the Tootsie podcast. Instead, I would say we are going...
Came out
almost
the same year, though.
Is it the same year?
Well, I think Tootsie came out in 82. Road Warrior came out in 81, but it was released in America in 82.
Right. Good call.
Well, and that is, you have hit on what the title of our film is, which is Mad Max 2 Road Warrior. Steve, can you remember how you first came to this film?
I believe that I think like a lot of early 80s films that were R-rated, I think I came upon it on HBO or Cinemax, because I wasn't old enough to see it. I remember seeing like the ads for it, and I remember seeing like the cardboard stands at the movie theater for it, and being fascinated by it. And I remember, 2 days ago I saw a vehicle that'll haul that tanker, whatever. Like that was because that's one of the few lines Mel Gibson has in the entire film. That was the one line that's in the trailer and in the TV commercials and stuff. But I don't think I actually saw it until it was on HBO, and then I recorded it onto a VHS tape, and I had it. It was one of my only VHS tapes, and I had Enter the Dragon, The Road Warrior, and The Terminator on the same tape, and I watched them probably more than any other film.
Wow.
For me, I don't know how I got into the theater, but I know I saw it at the theater, at the Rafael Theater in San Rafael, sitting in the balcony. But I was, 13 years old, so I must have had a grown-up with me, but I don't know who took me. But I have such a distinct memory of going to see that movie and having just I don't know how you quite describe that experience for a geeky, nerdy... This is like all the stuff that I really wanted to see in a movie that had never existed before.
And you never snuck into any R-rated movies? Not that we advocate that.
No,
I don't.
For underage cinephiles fans out there.
It's certainly possible that I did, but this was like the Rafael was like one. It's not a multiplex or anything, so I couldn't have bought a ticket.
Oh wow.
To anything else. It was that was just the theater. John, do you remember how you first came to it?
I think in very similar ways to Steve. I think we recorded it off NBC or whatever.
Oh, wow.
I remember that, and then we watched it cut for the first time, and I had watched it over and over and over again. I had not seen Mad Max, so this was my
neither have I.
most of America.
most of America. I hadn't seen Mad Max, so it wasn't until it became I could rent it from the video world or the video store in Virginia that I could see the uncut version,
Right.
And which isn't that much different. There's not a lot of cussing. There's some nudity, but it's more about the violence, right? And so, but I remember just falling in love with this movie, and I would watch it over and over and over again. I remember I became a big Bruce Spence fan because I've always
Gyro
wanted
Captain.
to run into him somewhere and just talk to him or interview him. That would be awesome. And I remember this is like this is the Mel Gibson before Lethal Weapon for me. Like I knew this before Lethal Weapon, but I'd fall in love with this movie over and over and over again. And Hawk and you can run, but you can't hide. Or I always use the line in the film when he's like, "You want to get out of here? You talk to me." Like that kind of stuff. It was such an eminently quotable film.
Oh yeah.
And Lord Humungus, that's just such a crazy fucking person to have in your life as a young teenager that it shook me, and I loved the movie, and it made me come back to it over and over.
It's funny that it's so quotable considering that there's not very much dialogue in the film.
But what is in there is priceless.
Yeah, George Miller and Terry Hayes are geniuses, particularly George Miller.
And one other thing I should say is that one of the reasons we're doing this today is it's a pick from one of our patrons on Patreon, Wayne Edwards, suggested.
Well done, Wayne.
Yeah, good job. One of the things that you mentioned as you were talking how you came to it is that this is one of the weirdest movie origins in history, which is that this is a sequel, but the way it was released in the U.S. was as its first film.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't even know that there was an original Mad Max until years later. I remember watching the Mad Max for the first time in the apartment that I shared with Jeff in Walnut Creek, which is where one of our mutual friends. And
Oh wow!
yeah, years later.
Like college age?
Yeah, like I was 18 probably. 18 or 19 when I finally saw Mad Max, because this was just, but I'd seen Road Warrior, which is, didn't call it Mad Max 2 at the time,
No.
because Warner Brothers released it as its own movie.
Yep.
Because I saw Mad Max, I think right around when I met Jeff, because he had seen it, so like in high school, but it was much harder to get a hold of, and I only saw the dubbed version because I don't even know if you could see it with the Australian.
I don't think so. I only saw the dubbed version.
until DVD.
Right.
Maybe on Laserdisc, but I never could afford Laserdisc. So
When I found out that it was a dubbed version, I was super pissed.
Yeah.
Because like that's what you grow up remembering.
yeah,
And then you watch the dub version, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is completely different.
Yeah. And a couple of things about Mad Max, just because I found it interesting. It's obviously a very low budget film.
300 something thousand at that time.
Wow. It was George Miller's first film.
Yeah.
And when they finished shooting it, they had 6 weeks of editing and they ran out of money. And the producer said, well, I guess we got to release what we have. And George Miller said, no. And he kept editing the film on the cheapest possible editing equipment in his house for almost a year.
In his kitchen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
And what he says, which I love, is this is where he learned filmmaking. Like
Yeah.
this was film school.
Because he said basically he was constantly being forced to be made aware of what they had and how they could make the most of it, and what he didn't have and what he wished that they had, as they tried to assemble that cut.
And it's so funny because this is it's such an important thing that I tell all my students in film school, and why all of my directing students are required to edit their own films, because editing is the teacher.
Yeah.
Because you're in the editing room and it's just what you said. You go, oh, I needed a close up here. Oh, I don't have this storytelling right. Oh, these things don't fit together the way I thought they did. So the next time you go to shoot, you know more and more of the things you need. If you don't actually edit your own films, you never learn these lessons.
And it's why, Mad Max is a great film, full stop, but it's why The Road Warrior is just light years ahead of it.
Yeah.
It's so much better.
In the midst of this process, he goes to Peter Weir, obviously, probably the most successful Australian filmmaker of the time. And he comes to him and he says, I don't think I can make movies. This is just too hard. And the description I like was like, it's like you go out to walk a dog that's like a huge dog, and that dog just drags you around and beats you up down the street. And Peter Weir's response was, it's always this hard. And his description was, it's like you're part of a platoon in a jungle, and you got your men and you got your mission, but you don't know where the landmines are, and you don't know where the snipers are, and a whole bunch of unexpected things are happening, and whatever happens, you have to be flexible and finish the mission. And it's the willingness to embrace unpredictability is what filmmaking is. That is such a great way of looking at making movies.
Yeah, and thank goodness those guys had that talk. And to me, it's not a surprise of like, I think with Australia, and this is probably true of New Zealand too, or Canada, you know, of like countries that are a little bit smaller, there's a little bit more of a collaborative sense, you know, that because if you think about it too, George cast Mel, you know, but then Peter followed up and cast him in the next two movies, you know, his next two movies.
Oh, right,
He's in Gallipoli and The Year of Living Dangerously,
Right.
which came out, I think, the same year as Road Warrior also.
And Gallipoli is the first time I had seen Mel, because I saw that in the theater with my parents.
Yep.
And that was one
It's
of the
amazing
most
film.
stunning. I remember getting the end of that movie. I think I might have said that when we talked about, maybe it came up before on the show, but we got to the end of the movie and the credits are rolling and the audience just sat there in silence. And nobody moved. Nobody got up. Credits ended, lights got up, and slowly people in the theater got up and walked out. I never had that experience before. Wow.
Well, and I think that's, you know, just a quickly tangential on this. John was talking about visiting New Zealand with his girlfriend, is that there's an exhibit in Wellington at the Te Papa Museum about Gallipoli, and the Peter Jackson and Weta, they did these giant, oversized, like statues of all these soldiers and people that were in Gallipoli. And I think, you know, Gallipoli totally changed Australia and New Zealand's like whole approach to war, I think, in a very profound way. And I think those countries have been a lot less inclined to just like jump into armed conflict because of the scars from Gallipoli, you know. So just I don't know if you guys ever do, you know, some Peter Weir. I don't know. Have you guys done Peter
We haven't
Weir
done
yet?
a single Peter Weir.
No.
And definitely,
There's so many good choices.
Yeah, Gallipoli, Witness, and of course there's Master and Commander, which isn't my favorite Peter Weir, but those books are
great.
so important.
And
to me.
I love Year of Living Dangerously.
I haven't seen it in forever.
That might have been, I might have seen that before Gallipoli, and I remember, you know, I think I did a report on Indonesia in high school because of Year of Living Dangerously, and because I was a Road Warrior fan, Mel Gibson fan, and then then I watched a movie I
So
would never have
facto.
watched. Yeah,
And Mad Max did get a release in the U.S. It didn't do terribly well, but it did have this sort of underground on-video following, which was enough to make Warner
and
Brothers.
drive-ins. I think it did well in Texas and in the kind of drive-in culture.
Really?
Because, and we'll get to this more, but Mad Max has all this amazing stuff going for it. But one of the places in its Venn diagram of where it got people is car fans, because it's you know, like, and I think
makes
that's
sense.
that's a George Miller quote. Is like, look, the U.S., you guys have your gun culture. For us, it's cars.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, I mean, if you had
way less deadly than the other.
yeah, you had Dan on for Conan, Dan Panosian on for Conan the Barbarian, and like I asked Dan, I'm like, hey, what's Mad Max drive? He's like, oh, a '73 Ford Falcon. Like he knew, you know,
Right.
like so guys that love muscle cars, Mad Max is definitely the whole world. It's definitely a thing for them.
One of the interesting things, too, is that after the movie came out, what's the name of the writer again? It's
Terry Hayes.
Terry Hayes. So George Miller and Terry Hayes are talking about why did this movie do well? And it was only after that they started to discover Joseph Campbell and these sort of heroic archetypes and the hero's journey. And they went, oh, this is why the thing we already made resonated with people. And that helped them in terms of coming up with the script and the ideas for Road Warrior.
Right, because then they doubled down and read. You know, they started reading. I think I don't think they'd read Hero of a Thousand
No.
Faces until after Mad Max came out, and then because they're like, wait, why is Mad Max so popular in Japan and in Italy and you know all around the world?
And now they plug that into this idea for Road Warrior, and they also was right at the end of the Arab oil embargo, and they come up with this idea. Because the other thing that's so strange to me is that Mad Max, the post-apocalyptic world that's in Mad Max 2, that is not the world of Mad Max 1. They're connected, but it's not like the same.
Well, no, and that, I think. I'm post-apocalypticism. What that? I mean, or help me with that word, please. Seeing a post-apocalyptic world, the Road Warrior is really the first major depiction of that in film that we saw. Like the only other stuff that you could say is close Planet of the Apes is a post-apocalyptic
Yes.
thing,
Right.
But it is still kind of a science fiction film because there's talking apes in it. You know what I
Right.
mean? And there's that really obscure movie from the 1970s called A Boy and His Dog
I was
with
just
Don
going to
Johnson.
mention that one, yeah.
But again, it has a telepathic speaking dog
Yeah.
in it and stuff like. And I think Road Warrior really is the first time that we see it in film where it's not really science fiction. It's just because there's nothing happens in the Road Warrior or Mad Max that can't just happen in real life. It's essentially just a drama projected forward in time.
Well, and it isn't about. It doesn't have challenging themes the way that Planet of the Apes does. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have deep thought. I think about Road Warrior so much.
Well, I think it's definitely I think it's the beginning of. It's such an influential film in this particular way. Like, it defined the look of post-apocalypse in a way that
100%.
had never done since. I was in a Shakespeare production in 1988, like 6 years after it came out, of Titus Andronicus, where the director and the production design based it on like, what if it's because Titus Andronicus is supposed to be like as Rome is on its way down, on its decline, and so they're like, what if it's all set in Road Warrior? So our whole costumes for that production was.
Well, and to be frank, there's several stories I've written in one way or another where really, in the back of my mind, the world was Road Warrior.
Yes.
Just the setting is so. And of course, my story might have gone a different direction, but that image of that world is so strong.
Well, it's amazing that within a 12-month period, we have the Road Warrior and Blade Runner, like two of the most influential depictions of the future that we've probably seen on film. I mean, certainly in the 80s, and they've still, everything that's come after them, no one's had much luck getting away from either of them,
So before we get into the movie, one more thought is that when I sat down to watch this, I take all sorts of notes and I try to write down as much of the film as I possibly can. And my thought when I sat down to do this one was, oh, good, there's not that much dialogue in this movie. It'll be easy. And it was the opposite because the action is so complicated. And the other thing that was hard was most of the characters don't have names. So I have all these things where it's like, guy jumps on the truck, guy does, this guy does this, guy with,
But the funny thing, do you look in the credits? A ton of them have names, but they just no one ever speaks
but
their
I don't
name.
know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it's like the Mighty Wes, the Golden Youth, like. Actually, if you look at all four of the Mad Max films, George Miller really seems to get a big kick out of just coming up with interesting character names.
Yeah.
And they're great.
The movie opens with that great music from Brian May, and we hear a little bit of the narration, which again is sort of classic within this genre of film.
I remember a time of chaos, ruined dreams, this wasted land. But most of all, I remember the Road Warrior, the men we called Max.
And as a comic book fan and science fiction fan, it just fits in with all the stuff that I was reading. And that push in on camera to that shot of Max is so cool.
But before, because you bring up that really great point about not knowing it's a sequel, is that in that voiceover, when we're seeing the montage, they do that brilliant thing where it's all found footage. It's all historical footage that's from the 1970s and before. But then to have someone from the future talking about stuff that seems more or less current as the past, like, does something to our head. It's all in black and white. And then the fact that they intercut it into the images from Mad Max 1. So basically in less than 2 minutes, they give us all the information that we need to know from Mad Max 1, to the point that you don't even know that there's a movie that you've missed if you haven't seen it,
The thing I was thinking about is how many comic books did we all read where the first 2 pages told you the origin story or the history or the flashback of the previous issue?
In like 2 captions.
And this was like that.
Yeah. Well, hell, the opening crawl of New Hope gives you all this stuff, and that's the first movie in that you've ever seen of Star Wars.
Right.
It gives you all this background stuff that you're not going to see for many years later.
Yeah.
So that's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's like a visual version of that of the Star Wars crawl in a way.
Right.
And then out of this sort of black and white flashbacky thing, we go into this image of the road just flying by, camera really low. And this is where I first learned that, the camera's low, makes everything look fast.
Yep.
Because details go by.
When I think I read, they needed to have it low too because of the lack of any other background detail. That if they didn't have the camera low to see the ground going by, you don't have, say if you're going by like in Endor in Return of the Jedi, you got all these trees flying by, so it looks really fast. Like if you're in a city, you got all the buildings going by. If you're in the desert, if you don't got the road going by fast, then it doesn't look like anyone's going fast. You know?
Oh, that's so interesting. And then there's this great cut, and there's Max shot through the window driving, and we see a whole bunch of crazy cars. And we see that he's got this very Australian-looking dog in the car, which apparently was in the pound and about to be put down.
Yeah, they literally saved that dog's life to get it in the movie.
And we come up on some wreckage, and the car swerves, and the motorcycle jumps over it. This action sequence, this is right from the beginning. We see how good George Miller is at shooting action. I mean, the shot selection, the way the camera moves, it's so exciting. It's so fast-paced. And do we have any idea what's going on in this movie? None.
We don't necessarily know, well, except in a way there's a little bit of a save the cat thing right away of like, all right, we don't know if the bad guys are the people chasing or the pursued, but what lets us know that probably the person being pursued is the good guy, he's got a dog.
Yeah.
And the dog looks friendly.
Yeah.
You know?
And his little red flashing light comes up that he's low on fuel, turns off his supercharger, whatever that is. It is super cool. Cars start pulling up to him, and now for the first time we see Wes.
The mighty Wes.
The mighty Wes.
Vernon Wells.
He is awesome. And he was a theater actor, and apparently his personality is nothing like this. He's soft-spoken, he's sweet, he's pretty nonviolent, and when George Miller wants to hire him, he goes, I don't think I'm the right guy for this part. And he goes, no, you are. He goes, no, I don't think I'm going to be able to do what you want me to do. And he goes, well, just come in and we're going to do the makeup and the hair. And trust me, it's going to be good. And they bring him in. And what's amazing to me is he let them shave his head and do the mohawk.
Wow.
And they put him in leather and they put him in the makeup and they did all the stuff. But what they didn't have was a full-length mirror in the room as all this is happening to him. So he hasn't actually seen himself. And he gets in all the stuff, and George Miller is in the office next door or wherever, and there is a full-length mirror in George Miller's office, and all of this is on purpose. He walks in, George Miller looks at him and goes, yep, turn around, points him to the mirror. Vernon turns around, sees himself, and instantly becomes Wes. Like, as the moment he saw what he looked like, that character came to life, and his performance is amazing in this movie.
It's totally great.
Yep.
It is stunning, and nothing like, I mean, he steals, if you could steal a movie from Mel Gibson, he almost does.
I would argue that he is the reason the movie works, because you have to have a good, like, Humungus doesn't want to get his hands dirty. Wes loves getting his hands dirty about everything, and he's gay. Like, there's just so much about this in 1982.
It's a huge deal.
Massive.
The Golden Youth, what I love about it too is they don't comment on it.
Yeah.
There's not even the slightest hint of like, what are those two totally offensive bad guys in Diamonds Are Forever? You know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like they don't in any way say anything negative about Wes or the youth.
Right.
When the youth is hurt, Wes is genuinely heartbroken.
Yeah.
You know,
And we're actually sad in a weird way, too.
yeah,
I
no,
think.
it's true. And then also, and it's not just like, oh, we're in prison and we have no other choices. Because in a little while, they let us see that there are women in the in the bad guy group, and the women aren't just all prisoners either. Like there's that one moment where, you know, there's a man and woman making love in the tent, and the woman's on top. Like it's clearly a consensual, you know. So basically, Mighty Wes could have had who he wanted to have, and he had the Golden Youth, which I think for 81, 82, that's very progressive.
It's incredible.
Well, stylistically, the whole movie is so daring, and George Miller obviously continues that throughout his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
The echoes of Furiosa are there in Max's wife in Mad Max, and with the warrior woman. And it, you know, is such a strong female character.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's basically like Furiosa, you know, part zero. You know, like she's the prelim to Furiosa.
Yeah, I actually might put. We've had conversations on this show before about who is the greatest villain. I think the Mighty Wes might be among the top 2 or 3 greatest henchmen. Like,
yes,
good call.
Like you're right. Odd Job,
the
Mighty Wes.
Yeah, he is such a scary Alexander Goodenough in Die Hard.
Yeah.
This is an interest. This should be a top 10 list.
That might be not a bad idea for us to do. Maybe Steve on the show.
So this moment, Wes on the motorcycle on one side and Guy on the other side are coming up. both on either side. And of course, Max has turned his supercharger up, so they're catching up. And just as the moment they're about to catch him, he slams on the brake. They have crossbows they fire, and Wes gets hit in the arm. And the other truck rolls. Max skids to a stop, and a great just sliding skid to a stop. Everything is just shot so cool.
It's an interesting thing, though, what you say. It's an interesting story structure thing to establish, in a way, your bad guy first.
Yeah.
And to set him up as being a badass, because, you know, Wes has that whole thing where he pulls the crossbow, you know, out of himself. And basically, this is for us to see, this is a very formidable guy, you know. And I fucking love the sound design in that moment, and this happens throughout the film, because the film is so subjective. 90% of the film, we only see what Max sees.
Right.
And so what's great is that when we first have that shot of Wes starting to pull out the crossbow bolt, we're on Max as he's starting to get the gas out, and we hear from exactly the sound level that Max would hear it being 100 yards away, this scream, but it's not that loud. And then when we cut in on Wes, then the sound goes up. I don't know that I'd ever seen that in a film before, like the subjective use of sound. Like usually in a film, if we were on Max and he's 100 feet away, when we heard the scream, we would hear it at that same pitch volume.
Right.
You know,
It's funny. I hadn't put it all together, but you're totally right. And there's several subjective uses of sound that are amazing in the film that we'll get to. In this moment, Max jumps out of his car, runs over with some buckets and cans and bowls and to try
World War I army helmets.
Yeah.
You know, like literally anything that will hold liquid, you know.
And this is great storytelling, because what's he doing is he's trying to get the drips of gas out of the wrecked car. And
What do they call it, John?
The guzzoline. I love it.
And just as he's finishing up, we hear another scream, and a hand comes out of that wreckage.
Oh, yeah.
And he opens up the door, and dead body drops out, and that dead body is carrying a little tiny music box.
Yep.
A hurdy-gurdy,
Yep.
I believe is the technical term. And Max spins it, and we hear the song.
First hint of only of the 3 smiles that in the film, that we get a little tiny glimmer of smile at that first.
It makes sense, doesn't it, though? Because
It's reminding him of the old world.
of his childhood, of his child and his wife, right? I mean, like how they were killed by that gang. If you see the first movie, this whole remembrance, because I'm sure there aren't many that
Right.
he encounters in this post-apocalyptic world.
Well, because he's lost. I mean, you know, he essentially loses his humanity in Mad Max.
Yeah.
He just becomes this. He loses his wife and child, becomes this engine of vengeance, if you will. And then this film is about him regaining his humanity, which they actually. That's the last line that the narrator says. You know, in the beginning of the film, they basically tell you, you know, it's about a guy getting his humanity back. They just say it right at the beginning of the film, you know, but you've been so bombarded by everything else, you don't even realize, like, oh, they just told us the whole ending.
Mel's performance is so spare and so simple in a lot of ways. He says an interesting thing that I liked, which is he said that the key to being an action star is to always look scared, but then always try to be cool and don't say too much and don't do too much.
That's fair.
Well, 'cause, I mean, this performance is amazing when you think about it. He's 23 or 24 when they shot this film. They had to put the gray in. You know, luckily there's a lot of sun in Australia and New Zealand, so you like he looks more weathered than probably most 23 or 24-year-olds do. But it's when you think about some of the 23-year-old actors that we could imagine now that are playing like teenagers, to think that this guy holds down this whole movie, you know, it's definitely a component. Just his star quality is a component of why this film is such a big success.
100%. And well, we see what happens after this. I mean, between this Gallipoli and You're Living Dangerously, that dude's a star.
Yeah, he pretty much rules the 80s in the Hollywood box, you know, in terms of the films he gets to do.
He sees this strange machine, which is the gyrocopter.
Can I just say really quickly, I love the story is so lean that we finish the sequence with Wes, and then the next time we just see Mel coming across the Gyro Captain. There's not like 5 minutes of him doing other shit or just driving around. We just go right to the next important story point.
And he gets out of the car. He's got a crowbar, and we see sort of a top-down shot, And he walks up, which is a beautiful top-down shot, by the way. He walks up really cautiously.
What I super love about that top-down shot, and you so rarely see him, and it's such a beautiful one, but there's all these really weird long trees in the setup before, and we never see the top of those trees. So somehow it doesn't seem that strange that we're seeing, because somehow I imagine that we're in one of those trees looking down, even though it's a crane shot. But
so you're saying the environment actually clues us to the cut to the top-down shot?
It feels like it to me.
It never would have occurred to me. It's interesting because you're a storyboard artist. That's, like the moments at which you are allowed to cut, because top-down shots tend to be very jarring when you cut to them because we essentially never see the world that way.
That's the logic that well, what I also love about this top-down shot, George Miller's story logic is so impeccable in all of the 4 films, and in general, like he's so strict in like when he creates rules, then everything's got to work that way, whether if it's a talking pig and Babe, you know what I mean, like then like whatever the rules are that he makes up. And what I love about that shot is the geography of Road Warrior and all of his movies, but the Road Warrior, it always makes so much sense. Like this whole scene that we're about to go to, it's like he never cheats on where anyone is. It's like he just moves the camera where it's supposed to go, but he never does. He never does any kind of like, wait, where were we? How does that? Like you always know exactly where everyone is, and that top-down show literally shows you the car is here, the helicopter is here, and I think along the lines with his weird sense of geography, there's a lot of shots of feet in this movie, like more than you usually see. And he uses them as such a storytelling thing too. If it kind of keeps you grounded where you really know exactly where people are going, and sometimes you're just following people going someplace. I don't know. It's strange. Most people don't cut to feet a lot,
Fetish.
Sure.
Could be. Sorry.
And he walks up cautiously because we soon discover that sitting in the gyrocopter is a snake. And what does Max do? Grabs it.
Yeah.
And the moment he grabs it, out of the earth rises the Gyro Captain with a crossbow.
Don't hurt the snake! Put it down! Gently.
Played brilliantly by Bruce Spence. There's some great foot shots there, because after he's starting to, when he wants to have kind of Bruce Spence coming around, we cut to his feet, and then we see this great foot acting that Bruce Spence is doing,
So
this little
With
dance.
the pink shoes.
Exactly. He's wearing Converse low tops.
Apparently he had just gotten out of the hospital when he was shooting this and was not well.
Right.
And yet managed to jump. So here's a question, by the way. What was he doing? What's the plan here?
Well, I guess it's
A trap for what?
to rob people of their stuff,
Okay. You're in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
You leave a snake in your gyrocopter. You bury yourself in the desert and wait.
Well,
It's
like
a weird plan.
like a predator would do, right? I mean, you see this all the
guess.
time. Yeah, they
Yeah, he's kind of like being like one of those spiders that buries itself in the sand.
Yeah, exactly. It's better than being prey, which he would be flying around with that copter, which makes a lot of noise,
Right, and
attracts attention, or riding around on
he's
it.
hiding himself in the shade, basically. Like,
And he's a skinny guy. He's not going to scare anybody out there.
And he's surprised that Max was faster than Snake.
Yeah.
Must be.
reflexes. That's what you go. Reflexes.
And now we find out what he's after, which is the gasoline.
Exactly.
The guzzoline.
And as he wants him to go to it, what do we find out about the gasoline?
booby trapped.
Booby trapped. Touch those tanks and
Do you know every single one of Mel's lines in this movie?
Maybe there's only 30-ish.
Wow.
He doesn't have a lot. Some of them are repetitive, like where, which actually that's not a good. The R is soft in the Australian accent, but it's hard to imitate the word where if you're an American with our hard R's.
And Max leans down to go disarm the booby trap, but what's right next to the booby trap is a knife.
Yeah.
And as he reaches for it, the Gyro Captain puts that crossbow right on his neck and says,
A quick fella, might have a weapon under there. I'd have to pin his head to the panel.
and so instead of pulling the knife, Max flips the switch, disarms the booby trap, starts to go for the door of the car. Nope, not going there, because not going to fool me like that. So instead, Gyro Captain goes towards the door of the car, and what pops out of that door? Dog.
which I think I read or heard somewhere where that Bruce Spence and the dog actually got along really, really well. So they had to do a thing where he just kind of tricked the dog into go for his scarf. And so, because it's just a quick shot where the dog is ostensibly going, but he's really just going for the scarf, you know.
And as he's now in deep trouble, he lets out about that there's this place with gas as much as you want. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And Max is interested. Asks where, and he says, "Kill me and you'll never find it."
Kill me and you never find out.
Cut to them driving, which is a classic movie cut. We don't get to the end of that thought. The end of that thought is completed by the fact that we're both in the car. We're driving, except he's tied up.
Yeah.
He's got a gun pointed on him with a little string on the trigger. The string goes to a bone. The bone's in the dog's mouth.
Well, that's what I love too, is that this film is played totally seriously, but George Miller has a very like wry sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
And wherever they can sneak in a little bit of humor, it's there, you know.
Well, and it's also, Max is not a good person. You know,
Certainly not a nice person. Like, he maybe ends up becoming a good person again, but
he's a former policeman.
Yeah.
So he's naturally skeptical and cautious. He lost his wife and child to this biker gang. So for him, as you said, Steve, he lost his humanity in the last film. So for him, being a good person or bad person is irrelevant. Survival is what's relevant.
Right.
And whatever he needs to do that, he'll do, including putting a bone in a dog's mouth that could blow the head off. And I love Bruce Spence's his big eyes come in handy in these moments when he shows fear and total hesitation.
well, when
and
the
there's
dog
like,
looks at
Yeah.
the bunny.
I love that moment. I love the fear in his eyes.
Two other things about this. The first is that what was the Gyro Captain's plan to do with him? Killed by a snake?
Right.
If he had not been killed by the snake, was after he got the gas, was the gyro guy going to let him live? Maybe
No,
not.
I don't think so.
probably not.
Other thing about this is what we find out later. That gun ain't loaded.
Yep.
So he wasn't actually risking his life by doing the string and the bone in
Right.
the dog's mouth.
Right. That's a really good point.
He's still a good person inherently.
Yeah.
The hero would do that, not load it.
And then we have a wipe, and we're walking, and we're on the feet again. You're right.
Right. It's a great way to set up, and they set up that whole, when they set up the whole refinery and stuff, and they go up on that hill, again, the geography of all of that works perfectly. You know, the boots lead us up to the hill, to the vantage point, and then when we see it behind that hill, they make it make sense that hill would hide everyone down there from being able to see Max and the Gyro Captain. It's just like, the geography is amazing.
And this hill, this is out in the middle of nowhere. I forget the name of the
Broken Hill is the town where they
That's
shot
right.
it.
It's near Broken Hill, and this was an old mining area that really no one had shot a lot of films there. A lot of people shoot films there now, and they're looking down, and what we see is this compound that's the refinery, and we also see a whole bunch of crazy bad guys around it.
Yeah.
And they're being fought off with flamethrowers, and Max is watching this whole battle through binoculars.
We see the Humungus from far away, and then we see Wes and the Golden Youth talking to the Humungus. So we go, oh, those guys, those extremely memorable Mohawk guy with the butt cheeks and the blonde guy. I remember them. How could I forget? They're so well designed, you know.
And since the Gyro Captain has brought him where he said he would bring him, he's like, hey, you know, man of his word. I kept mine, and has his chains out.
The arrangement was, I wouldn't kill you.
And he ties him up to a tree.
That's low.
And that's and that shot after he falls asleep, because it's in 235, right? It's like,
Yeah, it's 235.
all of George Miller's films, but particularly The Road Warrior, it is such an example of the rule of thirds composition. Like, every shot is so well composed, and particularly with its width and the rule of thirds, so often there are two things going on in the frame, you know, and usually someone's in the foreground and someone's in the background, but because of the lens he's using, they're both in focus, you know. And so when Max is just looking down, and then when he starts to take out the dog food can, which is the next scene, like we can see the Gyro Captain and the dog in focus too. Like it's almost like there's two things he's telling the story left to right,
Well, one of the things he does is he uses, for those shots, there are lots of wide-angle lenses, which allows you to have everything in focus. And then in all of the binocular and the telescope shots and all that stuff, it's super, super long lenses. The other thing is because it's anamorphic, which means to get that really wide image, you have to, the film stock is actually fairly square. It's 4x3, and that to get that image, you have to have a lens that squishes everything together. And then when you have it projected, you have a lens that stretches everything apart. So if you ever have your TV and you have the setting wrong and you switch it to 4x3 or something, and everyone looks tall and thin, that's actually what's being recorded on that piece of film when you're shooting 235 anamorphic. That's how they use up all that space. The problem is that is a big, huge, heavy camera, particularly at that time. And they didn't have a lot of dolly shots because laying out dolly on sand is hard because you got to lay out track and you got to balance the track so it's totally even. And sand is soft. And so sometimes you have to put down plywood, and then you have to put down the track, and then you have to balance out the track. It takes a long time. So they go, well, let's shoot handheld. Well, shooting handheld with a big, huge 235 Panavision camera is really, really hard, and yet that's what a lot of that is. So like the shots of them when the Gyro Captain comes out of the ground and they're kind of circling around them, that's all handheld.
Well, so Dean Semler is the director of photography for this film. Strong guy that he could manhandle these cameras and stuff, and he's an Oscar-winning cinematographer. Yeah. I think he did dance. I think he won the Oscar for Dances with Wolves. But he's shot some amazing films. Dead Calm is a great film that he shot that I really love.
And he did Apocalypto with Mel Gibson.
That's right, yeah.
Which is also a great looking film.
Yeah.
And he came out of documentaries. This is his first feature. And the thing about it is, like, documentary filmmakers, cinematographers, they have to run and gun. They have to be ready, and they have to get the shot and not have all the prep time. And so that really... It sounds like George Miller learned a lot from him.
George Miller's partner, who edited Fury Road, also comes from documentaries. I forget her name, and it's just when you think about the fact George Miller coming from being, a doctor and just like a real life person, it's interesting that he's such a great filmmaker, but he did not come up in a conventional filmmaking way at all. He didn't. He just studied film the way just a fan of film would study. It's not like he didn't go to film school or.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you said, we have this sequence where Max eats some dog food out of this can, which probably wasn't dog food. And then I love the Gyro Captain pulls out his big spoon. It gives a nice little look. And does he get that can?
No.
Well, that's so many scenes. And I think this happened with Mad Max and only more with Road Warriors. So much of the film is just told through pure film storytelling convention. I think it's why it was such an international success, because you did not need to be able to speak English, and it didn't matter. They didn't need to redub The Road Warrior because there's not enough speaking about it. But what people are saying, if you watch the film silently, it still 100% makes sense. You know what I mean?
Well, honestly, I was watching with Karen, and at this point in the movie, she said, this is pretty much a silent film, which it is. There's a lot of music. There is some dialogue, but it's mostly visual storytelling. It's the next day, and the compound opens up. I love that the gate is a bus.
That's what I love. George Miller's logic in all four of the films is everything is functional. That you couldn't just have something decorative that had to have a function. Like, talking about Mel with a crowbar, like all the details on his costume, like the jury-rigged knee brace that he made because he hurt his knee in Mad Max and stuff, and that it squeaks, know, and he has wrenches literally attached to the his costume is essentially just a walking tool belt. He's like a utility belt just walking, so he wouldn't have to reach or grab anything. It's just all right there,
And the way they built it, normally when you build a compound like that, most of it would be fake, except for the things that are on the surface that you need to see. It would be built out of light materials. That's not the case here. This is all real. It's all scrap metal. This is big, heavy built set.
Right, yeah.
And 3 cars shoot out of that compound, head off in different directions, and Max wakes up. And what does he see? He sees bad guys converging on one of the cars.
Yeah.
The camera zooms in as we watch those cars get chased down, and the camera is shaky on purpose. And this is one of the things that's really interesting, the way the film is shot. In fact, George Miller sometimes would go up to the camera operator and shake him a little more because it wasn't shaky enough.
Well, this is such another great example of the subjectivity, because when Max and the Gyro Captain get up there and they're first seeing the compound, we're hearing the Humungus and all these people yelling, but we're hearing it from a really far distance. You know, even though we're screaming, we're yelling. It cracks me up to think that the actor playing the Humungus had all this dialogue he had to learn that, you know, is like probably never really in the film. But then what Steve talked about with these close-ups, this is one of my, I mean, it's so brilliant. It's like, so Max has these binoculars. So we're seeing everything through his binoculars to give us a certain close-up. But now, as storytellers, we need to go closer. So George, it's not, he's not, well, that breaks the logic of the film for us to just cut closer. What if I give the Gyro Captain a telescope?
A ridiculously long
and
telescope.
the telescope is more powerful than the binocular, which now motivates why we can see it. And then we get to see one shot of the Gyro Captain looking through it. Yeah. And then Max looks up and says, like, what the fuck? And then he just takes the telescope so that now we as the audience can watch it because we're not seeing the movie through Gyro Captain's point of view. We're seeing it through Max's point of view.
And you get a little joke as he switches and takes the telescope.
Right.
And now we're in like an 800 millimeter lens, which is a super, super long lens. And the cuts from the wide angle lens in the real footage to that long lens, it exemplifies the fact that we're really looking through the telescope. And the car is flipped and we've dragged some people out of the car and one guy gets killed, and then there's this shot of this woman who is being attacked, and the camera pushes in on the Gyro Captain as he's watching, and he is smiling, and the camera pushes closer, and the music becomes dark, and there's a musical sting, and he stops smiling.
Yep. Right.
That's great storytelling.
Yep. It's schooling the audience. It's schooling the audience, right? It's schooling the audience of what to feel about that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, all without any words.
Yep.
You know.
It's later. Mel sneaks up on one of the crossbow guys who goes for his gun, and Mel, being very quick, steps on his hand.
And Mel goes up. He doesn't go up with a gun. He goes up with the bolt cutters that he's planning on using. So again, it's just it's so utilitarian. You know,
and he has a plan. He knows what he wants to do.
Yep. Absolutely.
And basically makes a deal with this guy who has been shot to the side of the car.
Yeah, he's been crossbow bolted to the side of the car.
That, you know, I get all the gas I want if I take you back. And he goes, yes. Right. And I love when he cuts him off.
I'm just here for the gasoline.
Gasoline.
As he drives in, we get our first glimpse of the feral boy.
Yeah.
Yep. Emil Minty.
Who has a boomerang. He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's so great.
One thing to think about, too, here in this moment is this is survival, right? Your instinct is stop the rape, stop the attack, stop the assault. But in this world, you cannot operate necessarily in that point of view. The longer game is what he's playing here. Is it selfish initially? Yes, but then eventually he takes part in this thing. But him waiting until they were done, these guys were, God knows how many times they had their way with this poor woman. They waited till they were done and then sneaks around when they have their guards down, when they're exhausted from the sex or whatever. So he has the advantage in that way.
But I get the sense when you watch it too, I think it actually happens like there's not a lot of time I think that passes in terms of like the distance that they are.
That's what I mean. It's a while.
Yeah, there's probably no way that
they
could have got down there and stopped the attack in time. Like the distance is so far. And then they're actually, you know, first Gyro Captain's reaction is when they kill the woman, you know, because the guy's attack her.
I think it's when they rape the woman.
Yeah, they rape the woman.
No, he has two reactions. There's first a reaction to the fact that he's looking, and then it's like, oh my god. But then there's the eye pop,
right,
where
they kill her.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Then he does the thing where he's looking through the telescope and the one eye is closed, and then there's that brilliant bit of storytelling with a musical sting of when they shoot her, you know, and they set up, we see that they're about to shoot her in through the POV of Gyro Captain, then we cut to Gyro Captain's face, and then the musical sting, and then his other eye pops open, and that's our reaction to know something terrible has happened. Yeah.
Here's the thing, and I totally agree with you, and I think it's such a good point, is that the emotional reaction to the horrible things that are happening to this woman are from the Gyro Captain.
Right.
They're not from Mel.
There's no reaction from Mel.
Right.
And we can assume that he has it's not that he has a heroic instinct to save her, but logically goes, I'm too far away, there's nothing I can do. It's that he doesn't we see no heroic instinct to save her.
This is the standard of Mad Max. He's the reluctant hero in every film he's in.
Right.
Which is kind of correlative to a lot of the martial arts movies, and where there were I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. His is more like, I don't care. Like, I want to move forward. But he finds himself, because he does have a good heart at the bottom of everything, he finds himself drawn into these situations where he has to try to save these people and
Well,
sacrifice
he's such an inscrutable, for lack of a better word, character. He has such an ambiguous nature in terms of his moral code.
Because he's the archetype of the fallen hero, right? You know, he was a cop. You know, he was unquestionably a good guy. He had a wife, he had a kid, and the wife and kid were killed. And so then he lost his humanity, and so now, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
This movie is about him regaining his humanity and regaining caring about people. And then, interestingly enough, that's the exact same arc of Beyond Thunderdome, and it's the exact same arc of Fury Road.
Right. That's the thing. He's the reluctant hero.
I think the comparison, to me, the comparison that hits me the most is Yojimbo. Is he's just this person whose motivations are sort of, what is this guy here for?
Fistful of dollars.
Yeah.
It's the same archetype. You know?
Watched that again yesterday. I hadn't seen it in a while.
I haven't seen it in a decade,
God,
at least.
I love that movie.
It's so good.
Fucking love that movie.
And then we cut to him. He's driven up to the compound.
Top 10 reluctant heroes.
He gets out of the car. He's got the guy on his shoulder, and the first question is, are they going to let him in?
Another great subjective sound thing. You know, because we establish the feral kid first, so we get some close-ups of the feral kid, and then Max holding the guy. And then when we're first hearing Pappagallo, we're hearing,
Take it real easy. That's as far as you go.
you know, we're hearing it from as if you were. And then when we cut in closer on Pappagallo, then we can hear him loud. But
So we've met our bad guys, and I should have said our bad guys are all in leather.
Yeah.
They're all mohawks. Mighty Wes has, buttless chaps, which I was talking to our friend Dave Rapp, and he said, well, all chaps technically are buttless.
True.
Are assless.
he has no underpants. He has no pants below the chap.
That's the salient point.
Right.
And that where this came from was the costume designer just raided all the S&M stores in Sydney.
Because apparently her apartment was really close to one or something like that. So she derived a lot of.
This is totally groundbreaking in terms of costume design. I mean, none of these things had been seen on film.
There's especially, Steve, there's a couple shots. A couple of the lesser bad guys are Frank Miller's designs of the mutants exactly.
Oh, sure.
You know, like in Dark Knight Returns, like a whole bunch of the gang called the Mutants, their costume designs are right out of this movie.
Sure. And now we're going to meet the good guys. Bad guys are dressed in black. The good guys are all dressed in shades of white, and they are wearing American football shoulder pads, and
which the bad guys are too, but theirs are just spray painted black.
they're just spray painted black,
Like the Raiders. Yeah.
I mean,
and Max, his costume is like the bad guys. It's not like the good guys.
that's a great point.
Leather.
And they let him into the compound, and there we see sort of our first glimpses. There's Pappagallo, who is the leader. He's played by Mike Preston. We see the mechanic, who's this paralyzed guy who's always hung by straps and swings floating around.
They didn't have a wheelchair, so again, it's like, well, how would we get him around? And it's in this little mini crane, basically.
He becomes one of my favorite characters.
Yep.
He's great.
We got the mechanic's assistant, probably my favorite character.
It's going to take a little time.
24 hours?
Okay.
Big Rebecca is the older lady. You know.
The warrior?
No, the warrior woman is called Warrior
Okay.
Woman, played by Virginia Hay, who was on that show Farscape. She was the lady all in blue on Farscape.
Because she's with the mechanic guy. They're together.
That's like
blonde
their partners.
seems
I
to
don't
be-
know.
They seem to have
seems to
a
be-
relationship.
Could be.
Well, there's certainly sadness later on and connection between the two.
Yeah.
There's the slightly balding "Will Never Walk Away" guy who
Yeah.
because remember when I did those daily drawings a couple of years ago, I did designs of all of these characters just for fun. And then the curmudgeon is the name of the old guy. You know, this Humungus seems like a reasonable man. You know, I can talk to him.
Who's the cheerleader? Who's the 18-year-old?
Oh, the one that looks like, well, and that's right out of Olivia.
Yeah.
Gone, let's get physical.
I was that was the one costume. I'm like, this does not fit.
Right. Well,
I get it.
I
but
believe
it
her
doesn't
name.
fit.
Her name is just Gyro Captain's girl or something like that.
I feel anytime you do future movies, it's almost inescapable. You get some hints of the exact time when something is done. In the same way that, like that Luke and Han both have just completely fashionable 70s hairstyles
true.
in New Hope. And right, she's the biggest hint of the day that they like, let's give her that straight up on top knot and the pink headband, which just seems a little bit too much like Olivia Newton-John.
And then one of the first questions he's getting as he comes in is, what happened to the girl?
Right.
And this is from that guy who's the balder guy.
Yeah.
And
The never walk away guy.
and he says, she's dead. And, how did it happen? And I think in his one bit of kind of kindness, he said
It was quick.
it was quick.
And I think it was, I mean, she obviously suffered horribly before, but her death was quick.
Yeah.
But all Max wants is some gas because he made a deal.
Look, I just want my gas. I want to get out of here.
Unfortunately, the dude he made a deal with is dead.
Yep.
And at this point, busting a deal does not mean facing a wheel. That will be 3 years later.
Yes. If you had a deal, you'd die with him.
I haven't seen that movie in a really long time.
I still love that film, but we should just talk about this one for now.
Okay.
Or I'll say this, though. I actually think, pound for pound, this is maybe another thing to be discussed. I think the Mad Max quadrilogy, as franchises go, say you can't count the Marvel film franchise because that's 22 films. Right. Pound for pound is the highest quality franchise of anything. Like if you think about Alien, you think about Star Wars, you think about whatever. The quality of the 4 Mad Max films, if you're going to say Thunderdome's the weakest, it's still a pretty damn good movie. And when you think about how good Fury Road and Road Warrior are, and then Mad Max is pretty solid, that's maybe a whole other... That's a top 10 thing of...
There aren't 10.
It's
of fighting over what
actually,
the franchises
top
are.
10 franchises is not a bad...
Top 10 franchises, definitely. But top 10 quadrology.
Oh, no, not quadrilogy.
Yeah.
But say you like, oh, I love Alien. I love Aliens. So, the drop-off.
I know we're in a digression, but one that had come up on this show that I still think is super strong is the Rocky movies and Creed movies. Is an incredibly high list. But someone, I think it was Vogel, posted today that the Toy Story movies might be the top of all time. And you know what? I think,
all right, that's fair.
I think they are.
Yeah.
But if we're going to say live action, then I guess that's my only...
Yeah, I think that's a good argument to make, actually.
And certainly I would argue they are unquestionably my favorite. The Mad Max franchise is my favorite.
The only thing that stops Thunderdome is the kid stuff. The kid stuff gets a bit annoying. Other than that, I enjoy it. Bartertown's a fucking awesome place to create.
It's great.
Yeah.
They start paying attention to the car. Once again, we hear that it's booby-trapped.
Wait, John, who runs Bartertown?
Tina Turner. Master Blaster. He's a raggedy man.
Tina Turner's another. I mean, when you think about Warrior Woman, Max's wife, Warrior Woman, Tina Turner, it's all just a direct path to Furiosa,
As they start talking about his car, what does the mechanic have in his hand? Booby trap.
Yeah.
That didn't stop him at all. And just as and the dog goes from and starts biting his leg.
Last of the V8 Interceptors, a piece of history. Would have been a shame to blow it up.
And here come the bad guys. And we close the gates, and people jump up to man the flamethrowers and the big crossbows, and the feral kid jumps down a hole. And what do they do with Max? They handcuff him up to a wall.
Yeah. I like the feral kids flip into the hole. It's always great.
So good.
It's great.
Scurry.
That kid, they have him do so much stuff that you would never let a kid do today.
It's amazing.
It is so dangerous.
It's Australia, man. They're tougher down there.
It's true.
Probably true. So well cast, that kid. His face is amazing, and his acting is amazing. At the point when he growls at the Gyro Captain, it sounds like an animal.
Yeah.
Like.
And now we see that strapped to the front of the Humungus cars are 2 guys from the compound. And this is a great example of what you were saying before of the subjective sound, because we see the guy screaming.
Yep.
And you could almost hear him, but you can't really hear him. And it makes it more scary. And of course, we see the mighty Wes, and who does he see? He sees Max.
Yeah. There
is a spiritual psychic connection between these two that we're going to see many points in the film. And out comes a character named Toady, and the Toady makes an announcement.
Greetings from the Humungus, the Lord Humungus, the warrior of the wasteland, the Ayatollah of rock and roller.
There's always a nerd. There's always a nerd in the crew.
God bless him.
Gotta have him.
I love the little the actor who plays the Toady is so great. I also love that he's got like the one sunglass eye patch, like as his costume thing. And then what's so great is I love like he regularly announces
the Humungus, but you get the sense that he's just come up with the Ayatollah of rock and roll on this one, because he's saying all of his thing, and then he kind of looks around, like looks back at, like, I wonder what they're going to think of this one. The Ayatollah of rock and roller.
What year is Escape from New York?
81.
Because the Escape from New York is, you're the Duke, the King of New York, you're a number one. Always reminds me of that. And now we get to hear the voice of the Humungus, which is Kjell Nielsen, who is a Swedish bodybuilder.
Yeah, I think it was Mr. Sweden.
And he's huge. And at first they weren't going to use his voice, and then they actually
Well, it's
totally
great too because
liked
it ends
voice.
up feeling like it's an Arnold kind of
totally.
like teasing or whatever, but then it's just this happy accident that they get this Northern European, bodybuilder who so it's because it's his own thing, because it's not exactly Arnold, but it feels a little bit like it's an Arnold ripoff. And the fact that he's like has Arnold's body with Jason the serial killer from Friday the 13th mask, basically.
I'm gravely disappointed. Again, you have made me unleash my dogs of war. Look at what remains of your gallant scouts.
Well, and his voice is kind of garbled, which works with his strange mutant head that is pulsing in some...
George Miller must love comic books, because there's one line in there too of like, "What a puny plan," like it's like
Very
that's
much
such
so.
a Hulk line.
Yeah.
Like only the Hulk calls things puny.
Well, and he wants to make a deal. And the deal is, he's like, I don't want any more violence.
Right.
Just walk away.
Just walk away.
This Humungus seems like a reasonable man.
Yeah, I mean,
Wes kills a bunny.
Oh, well, I mean, it's just, I think the Never Walk Away guy was apparently this very conscientious, sensitive in the best way actor. And when he read the script, he's like, I'd love to be in it, but you can't kill that bunny, And like, look, we weren't gonna, but look, we assure you we will not actually shoot a bunny. But then they had to go to quite an elaborate amount of stuff to come up with a rig so that they didn't hurt the bunny in any way. And that was the only way the guy would do the movie.
The feral kid throws his boomerang. Everyone watches it. He catches it with his giant gloved, gauntleted hand. Throws it again. Kills the golden youth on the back. That is Wes's friend. Mm-hmm. And this is the moment we talked about before. That's sad. And Wes throws it back. It goes over the kid's head, and Toady goes, "I got it. I got it.
I got it.
Fingers get chopped off.
off.
Hysterical.
I so remember this in the theater, and it's so shocking. And then what happens is that they all laugh at him. And then he laughs too. That is so... There's so much fucked up toadiness in that.
So sad.
It's a cult thing. To be part of it, he's such a nerd. It probably was never cool to be part of it, to be accepted. And then when that moment happens is a moment where he could actually express personal pain, but they laugh at him, and for him to stay part of the group, he has to laugh along at his own pain.
Well, the role of
Right, it's a very high school, like the worst part of high school moment.
Well, the role of the toady, I mean, his personal safety is tenuous at best.
At best.
As long you have to maintain your toadiness.
Yeah.
The moment that you go, hey, that hurt, stop being mean to me, you're done.
I'm sure he's been raped a few times by these guys on
Jesus.
Casual Tuesday. I'm sure.
On Casual Tuesday.
I'm just saying. Just because they feel
I
like
hate
it, I'm
getting
sure.
raped on Casual Tuesday.
And Wes at this point has gone pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to attack. And the humongous hug
Chokes him out with his throbbing veins on the back of his head. Another top-down shot.
Still my dog of war. I understand your pain. We all lost someone we love. But we do it my way.
Like a dog, right? He has to yank the leash.
I mean, well, that's how he treats him.
Yeah.
No more talk.
And he says, I'm going to give you a day.
We don't have to die.
Says Big Rebecca. She's the leader of the we should just give up.
And of course, we have the never walk away guy who is not giving up at all.
No. Because, we definitely get the impression that the woman that was killed
Was
his wife.
or was connected. They were connected,
Yeah. And as the bad guys all drive away, out comes the feral boy and grabs that boomerang. And it's a great shot. I don't know why I like it so much, but just that he, we think this is a shot about the cars driving away, and he sneaks out into the foreground, grabs it, and disappears.
Yeah.
And now we have the old army guy with he sounds reasonable. And we get into a big argument about.
And he's wearing, what I love is he's actually just wearing a sport coat.
Yeah.
And then he's found some
medals
and some of the medals are medals and some are just like bullshit kind of pins and coupons, but he's just sort of made it. And he's got a samurai sword, which I love too, and an actual, American World War II helmet.
Right. That's strange.
And Papagallo is talking to them about what would happen if they would walk away.
Remember one thing, that is more than just a tanker of gas. That is our lifeline to a place beyond that vermin on machines.
What's great too is as he's making this speech, which is ostensibly an important story point, in the middle of it we cut to Max interacting with the feral kid and stuff, and we don't hear all of Papagallo's speech because once we cut in on those guys, then we just hear it as this. That's why we should not walk away. Walking away is bad. Because now we're focusing on this other story element that's more important ultimately.
Right, which is
Max's humanity.
And he gives him the little music box.
Hurdy-gurdy. And that's the second semi-smile that we get from Max in the whole movie. Collect all smiles. Collect them all.
But the big thing is that even if they didn't want to walk away, they still haven't found a vehicle that can haul all the gas. And who pops in at that moment?
2 days ago, I saw a vehicle that'd haul that tanker. You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Later on, we're having a meeting, and he kind of lays out, like, my offer is, I'll get the rig, you give me all the gas I want.
And, okay, that is an amazing shot when they're in that, when they're in the tent that night going over the plan. Like Papagallo is surrounded by all of his group, so the shot they get is that you definitely get the sense
together,
that it's a democracy, even though Papagallo is the leader, like their group. And then when we cut to Mel's reverse, it's just him, and he's almost a silhouette. Like his whole body and his neck is all black, and there's just this little sliver of light that's just kind of covering his face. It's an amazing shot.
And it's shot as a lot of these shots are at magic hour.
Yes.
So you get that beautiful sunset. It's amazing that they have so many shots at that time because it takes such planning and such speed to get those shots. And they make a deal. And out goes Max with some gas and a couple of tanks on this stick on his shoulders.
Another amazing detail is the Never Walk Away guy oils his knee as they're discussing, going out. Like, it doesn't get its own close-up. It's like Max and the guys are discussing the plan, but there's just that great detail of like, oh, that little knee thing of yours is a little squeaky. And hey, we have an abundance of oil and gasoline here, so let's just...
That is a great little detail. And he's outside, and while he's outside, he makes a little bit of noise and almost gets heard by one of the bad guys.
Because he drops the things he's holding.
And what saves him? Little kid does beautiful howls. I love his performance. There's such an attitude that he has as he gives those last couple of yips or whatever. Yeah. And Max gives him a little nod. It's the morning, and he's back up on his hill. And again, we're at magic hour. Sunrise, it's backlit, it's beautiful. And then we cut to feet again maybe he just likes the Gyro Captain's feet.
Well, it's such a great way because he even starts on the feet when he first establishes Wes and the Golden Youth when he's going to pull out the thing. We pan up the guys on the bike. We start at the feet when we pan up to them and stuff. But this is another thing about not just intra-scene with what we're seeing between a few characters' geography, but this establishes, I bet that if we looked at a map of all the events that happen in Road Warrior, I bet George Miller could draw where everything is and this is why right after Max has the scene where he escapes Wes and he first sees the tanker, it's why we see the Gyro Captain right after, because now Max, to get to the tanker, he has to go through where the Gyro Captain's copter is.
Right.
Like it's literally like a path, and the Gyro Captain is trying to work his way back to the copter too.
Yep. And of course he catches up to him. Oh, and he's dragging a log behind him. I should have said that.
Yeah.
And the captain hears barking and looks back. There's the dog, and there's Max, and there's another little almost smile.
And now when we see the three of them approaching, who's carrying the heavy lifting now? Now the Gyro Captain has this stuff.
Who's mumbling about, remember lingerie?
Lingerie. Lingerie.
And what do they find when they get back to the copter? Dead dude, because the snake worked.
Yeah.
There's a little argument about who gets to eat the snake.
Fricassee.
And of course, while they're arguing about the snake, Max sits down and starts searching the body. And one of the things he finds is a couple of shotgun shells, which he quickly loads in his empty shotgun, which the Gyro Captain sees.
And this is where we had John quoted one of my favorite lines in there, where it's like, when we discover that it's not loaded, it's like,
That's dishonest.
Wow. That's what that is. Wow.
How do we know that one's not a dud?
Find out.
Cool.
And now we're flying, and we find that big truck, and Max is working on it, and he gets it started, and the Gyro Captain does a very funny kind of dance.
Matt Garcia's favorite line. We're partners. Partners.
And he's ready to go, and Captain goes, what about me? You're not going to leave me here. And he does throw him the keys.
Yeah.
So at least he lets him out at that point, and he drives away, and now we kind of have a driving sequence, and he checks his gun, and there's and these are these shots that George Miller does that I just love, which is that push in across the hood of the truck to Max driving. It looks so cool.
Yeah.
And of course the copter is following him. And now we see our bad guys.
Yeah.
And Wes is doing some grooming.
Yep.
And the moment Max is near, he perks up.
You're right. His spider sense tingles.
His spider sense starts tingling. And all the bad guys start jumping in their cars and getting ready to go after him. By the way, one thing, so I said we're in a kind of a miners area, and they needed extras. And so a bunch of the miners come out to be extras. And they get all done up in their mohawks. And they didn't like it. They were embarrassed. They would wear like hats and stuff because mohawks was not a cool thing when you were a miner in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And then by the end of the shoot, they kind of liked him. And they really liked him, and they started showing them off. And then when it became a big hit, they really liked it. And now they were very happy to have film crews come back in. And of course, today, all those mines have shut down.
Yeah.
So they need the industry.
Yep.
There's a great shot there with Humungus when Max is coming back through town, when, I just love the calmness of, he walks over, he's like, oh, I need to get out the special weapon,
Yeah.
And I love the slow methodical thing. And then the great storytelling of, he's got that, I don't know, maybe it's a 357 Magnum. We need Dan here for the
gun.
It's a giant gun. I think it's got a scope on it too.
Yeah.
And you can see he's just down to his last 4 or 5 bullets, so it's like, all right, this is a special occasion, time to get Bessie, or whatever. And then he puts a couple, right in the engine block, like.
There's a great shot too where Wes runs and jumps on a motorcycle. These are some great stunt work. I mean, obviously, we are going to see throughout his career, this guy is a master of stunts.
Yeah.
There's another shot where there's a guy who's under a car working on it.
Yep.
That car gets hit. He gets crushed.
One of the great. There's about 4 or 5 really great dummy shots in the movie, and that's one where it's a dummy, and we probably can kind of tell it's a dummy, but it's still a good dummy, and it's a good shot.
Still scary. And Wes shoots out one of the tires and jumps on the back of the rig, and we see the top-down view. One of the great things about having that gyrocopter is we have the gyrocopter shots.
Again, there's a lot. Yeah, there's always a logic to these shots,
And Mel does this big turn with the guys coming up behind him, and Mel fires his weapon. It is a dud. Wes smashes through the window and grabs Max. And there's one of the other weapons that we see is these big, like, multi-barrel pneumatic shotgun.
Yeah, that's
whatever
right.
They are.
Yeah, they get the tires.
Yeah, he shoots out some tires, but the gyro guy flies over him and drops the snake on him. He freaks out, panics, shoots the guy driving his own car, and they crash. And that's a big stunt too.
Yeah.
And now we finally make it into the compound, but 2 other cars get in the compound along with the mighty Wes.
Before they get the gate closed, yeah.
Before they get the gate closed. Then that pink car comes up and they destroy it with the flamethrower.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mighty Wes inside the compound is my favorite sequence. With him.
Yeah.
Climbs up on like the gantry walkway, whatever, does that cool twisting flip over somebody. Max runs up onto the top of the rig, climbs up to one of the flamethrowers, which he starts using.
Because Papagallo he's flamethrowing and he gets injured.
That's right. He gets shot with a shotgun bolt in the leg.
Or crossbow bolt.
Right, crossbow bolt. And I love the moment of Wes is finally getting out of the compound because he swings down on this, I don't know, a pole with a torch on top of whatever the hell it is. It lands, and when he hits the ground, there's a hiss that he makes that's just awesome. What a great character.
Does he say that? Yo. Is this what he says?
Yeah, that's when he says, yeah.
Yo, you can run, but you can't hide.
Which pretty much no one had ever said up until that point.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like hearing lines from Casablanca where now they sound cliche, but they didn't sound cliche then. And that's a line where it's like, all right, that was not a cliche when he said that.
Nope.
After the gyrocopter has landed in the compound.
And, just talking about feeding it, that's an amazing. When he does the pole vault thing, the collection of shots that they do to sell it, there's an amazing stunt. But then the landing is just feet. You know, where it's probably just a 3-foot drop with feet, but you get all the sense that he's just taken this big and foreground. Then he runs in, and I think he stays in focus. In focus in the foreground, runs to the background, and then I think we pan up to and then cut in on the close of.
That's great. It's after the gyrocopter has landed in the compound, and that feral kid is already kind of touching one of the propellers. And this is where you get the, like, leave that alone. He doesn't leave. Yeah. That growl is awesome.
It's so good.
And the older guy is kind of going, can that gyrocopter take two?
Yeah.
And he looks over at the blonde and says, possibly.
Yeah, that's a great cut.
A very good cut. And now we hear the Papagallo saying we're going to move out tonight, and kind of give some orders out. And now we get the moment, which
this is such, I mean, yeah, probably one of the most quoted things in the movie besides, 2 days ago or whatever, of just the great game of human telephone that they play between Papagallo, his assistant Zeta, and then the mechanic and the mechanic's assistant.
The rig! How is she?
Got a cracked timing case cover and it's broken a couple of teeth off the timing gears.
Got a cracked timing case cover, it's broken a couple of teeth off the timing gear.
The radiator's damaged at the core.
The radiator's damaged at the core.
Got a cracked water pump.
It's got a cracked water pump.
And a fractured injector line.
It's got a fractured injector line.
Well, what does all that mean?
Yeah, okay, but what does that mean? What does that mean?
24 hours.
24 hours?
They've got 12.
You've got 12. Okay.
Like that guy, he can't. I don't know. I wish I knew more about that guy.
What planet is that? I mean, well, and this is a thing that was the actors came up with this. This was their idea, and it's so funny and so kind of out of the movie. But you need it. This is the comic relief. Like this is the.
Oh yeah, it's important.
You got 12. Okay. Just that guy's so good.
So good. And now people are coming up to Max and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, we got you wrong." And so
Even
great,
the warrior woman.
Yeah. So great that you're going to drive the rig. He's not going to drive the rig.
Now that you've done everything for us.
And there's that great shot of, keep his vehicle at least. Like Papagallo's kind of got that cloak on. He just looks like a king.
Well, and as this is going on, what do we see off in the distance is the bad guys are now crucifying people.
No one gets out of here alive. Like now, let's assume, do we think the Humungus would have let them live if they'd let him walk away? Maybe. I don't know.
I don't think so.
But definitely at this point,
no.
He's like, look,
the
veneer of civility is over.
Everyone
now,
does.
No one gets out of here alive.
And they're all preparing for going out. They're welding, they're building stuff. And the Gyro Captain and the blonde are sneaking away.
Yep.
But at the last minute, she doesn't want to go.
No.
Can't leave her family. And she goes back, and he goes back too. And Max is kind of in the garage or whatever. He's siphoning the gas to fill his tanks because that was his deal.
Don't have time for long speeches. Papagallo tries to convince him to stay.
Got all I need here. You don't have a future. I could offer you that. Rebuild our lives. Max, buy a ticket for 2,000 miles.
And the old guy tries to kind of convince him with some postcards of this fantasy of where they're going to go.
Nothing to do but breed.
And then Papagallo comes at him.
What are you looking for? Come on, Max. Everyone's looking for something. You happy out there, are you? Hey, wandering? One day blurring into another? You're a scavenger, Max. You're a maggot. You know that? You're living off the corpse of the old world.
And he goes right to the bone.
What burned you out, huh? Kill one man too many? See too many people die? Lose some family? Oh, so that's it. You lost the family. It make you something special, does it? Hey?
And then that's when he's pushed that button where then Max is like, oh, shit, I got to get out of here.
Well, Max punches it.
Yeah.
And I like, too, what he says next is like, we've all lost somebody.
Yeah.
You're not special at all.
How does that make you special?
Here's my question. So Papagallo's goal is to get Max to drive the tanker. Does Papagallo already know that the tanker is a decoy?
Yeah, I think he does.
So he is sentencing Max to death for nothing at this moment.
No, I think
it's an acceptable loss. He's not part of the community. He's not part of the tribe.
That's what I think too.
He's a scavenger.
Exactly.
And he'll use him as a sacrifice for the greater good.
And look, I think he does think that Max has the greatest possible chance.
Yes, of all his people.
Of getting away.
Yes.
But right, he doesn't want to risk anyone in the group, ideally. He wants the group to, the tribe to survive.
Yeah.
But so I think he figures if Max gets away and then makes him to the rendezvous, great. It's a win, it's a win-win. But but certainly it sells his deception. If arguably the best driver is driving the rig, then he knows that the greatest chance that the bad guys will pursue the rig.
What's so interesting to me, though, is like our perception of that guy is he's a good guy. And he is certainly a good guy in the sense that if Mel doesn't drive it,
right,
he's going to drive it.
Right.
So he's willing to sacrifice his own life. But before he sacrifices his own life, he kind of would rather that this other person did it. And yes, there is some possibility that Max could get away.
Oh, I mean, one could make an argument. I think we're on the right track, but one could make an argument that Papagallo actually had intended to have Max drive the tanker with the gas in it because he knew Max was such a good driver, thinking that was the greatest chance. And when Max fell through, then that's when he switched to the decoy plane.
Right.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying that is the case, but I think there's an argument there. It'd be interesting to talk to the actor and George Miller because I know that they, Miller has backstories for all of these characters, and the actors did too, I'm sure.
But Max is not going to drive the tanker, and he is kind of dealing with the booby trap, and then we hear that music coming from the car, and I love this shot. He opens up the door, and the kid is on the door.
Yep.
Which I don't even quite know how that
they
works.
rigged that, yeah.
But it looks great. And Max grabs the music box and he tosses it away to get rid of the kid.
Yep.
And there's a sad kid there.
Yeah.
Because he wants to go with him.
Yeah.
And we have another wipe, and Max pulls out in the car, and everyone's kind of like, "You're letting him go? We should keep the car." And that's when Papagallo says he's an honorable man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if Max is an honorable man. He has a code of honor, I guess.
He definitely has a code.
Yeah.
I mean,
they open up the gate, and the gyro captain's like, "They've got you wrong. You're not a coward."
Stupid, maybe, but not a coward.
And then I love that he says you're splitting a great team.
You and me together, think of the possibilities.
See you around, maybe. Goodbye. Good luck.
Does Max at any time think of himself as a team?
No.
I don't think so. And of course, what happens the moment that Max is back out? The camera pushes in on Wes, and he opens up his eyes.
Yep.
I'm telling you, psychic connection between the two. People jump in their cars, they drive away. The camera's really sped up. I think it's 12 frames a second at that point. It's super sped up. And what's so weird to me about this sequence is it is over instantly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you expect we're going to have a big thing, but
right.
it's not.
Which is smart because we just had a big thing with the truck.
Yeah.
So doing something small with a smaller vehicle makes sense.
Well, again,
or quick,
like the leanness of this movie is all about story. So in the same way that we don't have some sort of buffer between Max's first introduction of Wes and the Gyro Captain, because it's like, well, what would that scene be about in terms of the story? Nothing. It would just be like, well, are we really going to get right to the next point of the story? Well, yes. And this is the same thing. It's not about now Max gives this great escape. We need Max to be hurt. That's what the story is about. So let's just get to it.
And yeah, Mighty Wes slams a big exhaust pipe or something through the windshield. The car flips over, wrecks that beautiful car that we all loved.
Yeah.
And Max is wounded and injured, and they go over to get him, and the dog is there, and they're looking for Max with a crossbow, and the Toady.
The tanks are full, Mighty Wes.
Mm-hmm.
And the Toady is going there to open up the tanks, and the guy with the crossbow sees Max's legs behind the rock, and who comes out behind the rock? The dog.
Yeah.
And then we see him aim, and there's a pause, and then he shoots that crossbow, and we hear that dog die. Apparently, all sorts of people came after George Miller for killing the dog.
Right. They all thought that he had actually killed it, that they thought they'd seen it on screen.
Well, that's the great thing about what's so fascinating to me, nobody came after him about him killing the girl or killing all the other people that get killed.
No, exactly.
Yeah, can't kill a dog.
How could you kill that dog?
Yeah. To be clear, he did not actually kill a dog. And just as that's happening, the Toady has opened up the gas cans, and we see that fuse going, and Max comes out with a gun, and then the Toady sees the bomb, and it explodes. And Wes looks down at this thing. It's all a wreck.
And Mel does some incredibly good hurt acting.
Oh, yeah.
Like
totally.
the echoes of a career of good hurt acting are given to us in
Yep.
that little moment when he's against the rock, when he's trying to fish for the shotgun and like his arm won't work and his face is all fucked up. He does some fantastic acting there. I mean, you could look really bad trying to sell what he's doing.
That one eye that's like half open.
I mean,
But I just love the lack of motor coordination thing. He sells that so good, you know.
Having done Braveheart a month or so ago or 2 months ago,
Yep.
I mean,
The man suffers like nobody's business.
Oh, yeah.
true.
Between him and Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford gets his ass kicked in every movie.
That's true.
It's true. It's a good point. We could have a paint off.
No, seriously.
Top 10 suffering heroes.
There's only 2.
And of course, back at the compound.
Arnold.
Back at the compound, they see the smoke, and we see Max dragging himself along. I love the dissolve effect that they're doing, which is I think they're just going forward and backwards a few frames in the shot, duplicating the shot probably with an optical, and then dissolving between them to create that blurry image. That's what I think is happening.
It's a great effect, though.
It looks great, and we hear the gyro, and we dissolve to that shot, Max's POV of the blurred gyro coming in.
I love that. And then shot of Max like barely alive, not
That
knowing what's
helicopter
happening.
shot's amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Because they fly over all the actual sets, all the stuff, you know. So we're seeing the shit that he's flying over in focus, and we're seeing Mel in focus too in the foreground. You know,
And isn't it changing colors, or am I dreaming?
I think it's just the light is changing.
That's it. The light.
And it really is Mel Gibson lying on a plank outside a real helicopter. The DP is standing over him with a handheld shot. It was cold. By the way, it was cold. This is
the whole movie was shot in winter. Yeah,
Poor Lord Humungus.
Everybody's freezing.
Oh, assless chaps.
Assless chaps. And Mel, I mean, he's just wearing like leather, but he's not wearing anything really warm.
I think there's a joke about thermometer bum. You know that when Mighty Wes's butt got too purple, that's when they knew they had to take a break, and everybody had to go inside.
That's hilarious. Well, apparently there were times where Mel is literally, they had these, big garbage cans filled with fire, and everyone would huddle around. Mel's standing around it, literally shivering, teeth chattering, and then they'd say roll camera, and he just stopped.
Yeah.
And that's the acting, man. And then as soon as they say cut, his teeth are chattering, and he's uncontrollably shivering.
Power of the mind.
Yeah.
And on this thing with the helicopter, it's also raining a little bit.
Oh, shit.
And George Miller reached his hand out of the helicopter just once and said that the raindrops felt like needles. They're hitting so hard. And that's what Mel is, it's the wind chill is huge. So that's what Mel's enduring when he's lying on that thing being wounded. Acting is tough sometimes.
Well, action movies, sure.
Yeah. And we're back at the compound, and Mel is kind of waking up on the bed. I love that the kid is coming into the frame of the doorway upside down.
Yeah.
Is great. And we hear outside that, again, our leader is kind of going over the plan, and he's going to take the tanker out and try to draw the people out, which means we already have the plan that this is a decoy.
Spoiler alert in case any of you listening to us don't know.
Yeah.
The tanker's a decoy.
And Max struggles out, helped by the kid. And they're having there's some arguing going on about whether the paralyzed mechanic guy should go with the tanker truck. And Mel interrupts.
It's all the same to you. I'll drive that tanker.
No more time for deals.
No deals. I want to drive the truck.
Why does he decide he wants to drive the truck?
Revenge.
How is that revenge?
Because he knows they're all going to come after him. And he knows he's going to draw them away, and he's going to get a chance to kill some of these people in the process who hurt him in this like 5 minutes ago.
Is it for the dog revenge? For this car?
No, for
what
him.
They did to him?
Well, yeah, what they did to him.
Well, he does say, he says, I'm the best chance you've got. So so Max is aware of his own awesomeness and skills. You know what I mean? Like, so that's how he's trying to sell it to them. And I do think he believes that, but it's interesting. Like, what achieved his humanity now at this point? Is that why he's, going and making the choice? Or is it still survivor driven of, look, if I'm left here, like I'm I'm fucked, I'm useless. Like, this is a way I can still be useful.
But he doesn't know it's a decoy until the end.
No, I know. Exactly.
So I think what he's doing here is like he knows he's going to
still
attract the
survival.
attention, and he is going to and he's the best chance they have. But also he's going to take out some of these motherfuckers before he goes down, if he goes down.
My instinct has always been that it's more I'm angry than I am altruistic.
Yes.
But it's it's not actually a carefully explainable moment.
I agree. It could be a combo of both.
Yeah. And they're kind of like, look, you can't drive a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Papagallo he knows what he's doing. He's tricking Mel into doing. He's tricking Max into doing.
Well, this is his best. I mean, at this point, like, this is, but he still chooses to go with the tanker. So
That's
he's
true.
still willing to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't go in the school bus.
You're right. He does. He's to protect the tank.
And as we're going to get to, he's going to try to save the kid too. At the cost of his own life.
So they agree. They give him some his gun. They give him some ammo, and we get in our cars. I love Papagallo's car. That's a cool sort of.
It looks like a
cone shaped.
It looks simultaneously like a rocket and like a shuttlecock. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And he puts on a weird hockey helmet or something.
Yeah. All found objects.
And we see everybody else, loading up into the school bus. And the gyro captain spins his propeller, and we get a little eye contact between him and Max. And here come the bad guys with their prisoners still strapped to the front of Humungus's car.
That's insane.
And I love this shot, I love the shot where we're on those prisoners strapped to the car, and the camera tracks to Mighty Wes, who we see now has a chain around his neck, and it continues to go back to the Humungus holding that chain. That's hilarious.
It's so good. He's literally let off the chain.
Yep.
You little puppy.
And they want to take the feral kid with him on the bus, but he gets away.
Right.
As the tanker is coming out, Humungus loads up his last 4 bullets. And the kid gets away and runs and jumps on the truck. Yeah. And again, this is a little kid who runs and jumps on a moving tanker truck. Like, I can't believe that they did that. And Humungus fires twice, and out comes the gyro captain, dropping Molotov cocktails on people. And now we're into what is arguably one of the greatest car chase action sequences ever filmed. Certainly among the most groundbreaking.
Thoroughly agree.
Totally.
I mean, I think you put this with French Connection, like as one of those, like, oh, this is going to change the nature of film. Yeah. And this is the thing about this movie is that I think Raiders came out in 81, right?
Yep.
And this is the next year. Is that
actually same year?
Same year. Oh, because this came out in 81 in Australia.
Technically, yeah.
Is that this is the moment of action movies, a movie where it's really action sequence to action sequence to action sequence.
Yeah.
And this one even more than Raiders, because Raiders has way more dialogue and other plot stuff going on.
Ostensibly, yeah.
This is like, just having the thrill after thrill after thrill, and culminating with this sequence is absolutely amazing. I love watching that truck just burst through those cars. You see the power of the weight of this vehicle.
Yeah.
The shot selection is beautiful as they move from close-up to POV shot to low-angle shot to panning shot to up to the gyro captain for those top-down shots.
Yeah.
It's really, really beautifully done. And we have that shot, high angle of the tanker truck driving away, followed by Humungus and all of these bad guys and motorcycles and all their cool cars coming after them. It's absolutely fantastic. And as we see them all go away, we cut back to the compound and our good guys going away in the school bus and all the other cars.
Right.
And of course, what happens next? A bunch of bad guys run into that compound.
Yeah.
They're really happy.
Right. We got it.
We got it. And right then we see the fuse going and we realize the place has been rigged to explode.
Booby tripped.
An amazing explosion.
Yeah.
Huge.
Which I think they shot from that's the ones. I think they had 5 cameras and they used them all, and we see every angle on that explosion.
Apparently, they didn't even use movie guys to do this explosion. It's the Australian Army.
That's right. Yeah. They're like, because they couldn't get the right kind of dynamite but the Army could give them the right kind of dynamite.
They had to tell the air traffic controllers and all the planes in the area that they were doing this. And here's why you could tell it's a big explosion. If you look at it, there are those huge truck tires that are, they got to weigh 400, 500. I don't know how much those things weigh. Massive things. They're thrown like 80 feet in the air. Like that is a big, big, big explosion.
Firebomb.
And from that explosion, we wipe to the chase. There's an aerial shot coming up behind the cars, up to the truck, all the way to the guys who I should have said, are in these defenses built onto the tanker with all these spikes coming out. They look like medieval, defenses where they have their crossbows.
It's a little foxhole basically on the top of the, or it looks like the Iron Throne almost. All those swords.
And we have, which it's just amazing to watch, is guys jumping from car to car. And at this moment, what is it time for? Humungus lets the mighty Wes off the chain. Yeah. When he gets released, it's just awesome. And our mechanic, who's the paralyzed mechanic, is throwing Molotov cocktails, which hits a car and bursts into flame, and that car crashes. Max looks out, notices the kid. Wes throws a grappling hook from his car and rips the door off, which A, is cool and scary, and B, is great visually because it opens up the image to get a better view of our hero.
Right.
And then from behind, one of the cars pulls up, throws a grappling hook,
gets the guy's leg,
catches the guy's leg.
Zeta, I think.
And that holds onto the car and ends up flipping the car over. And a terrifying stunt. And this is, in fact, George Miller says this is the scariest moment he's ever had working on a film. I bet. Which is that, so there's the main stunt driver is driving the car, and then there is a dummy in the car. And the car is supposed to do this thing where it's hooked on with the grappling hook, and then they're going to roll the car, and the main stunt guy is going to jump out. I think this is my understanding. So he jumps clear before the car rolls, and then the dummy in the car is supposed to break up. But as George is watching it, he thought the dummy flew out of the car, and then he hears the camera operator or someone like that say, "Oh no." And in his brain, he goes, "Oh, that must have been the dummy, and that must be the stuntman rolling in the car," which he sees get essentially completely destroyed. And he was certain that he had just killed a stuntman. And in fact, the camera operator said, "Oh no," because he felt his hat got blown by the wind and might have gone into the frame, which it didn't. And it was the dummy, it wasn't the stuntman, and everyone was fine. But for a minute or so, he was terrified. I can't imagine that. Unfortunately, as this happens, some fire gets on our mechanic's legs, and he is trying to put that out.
Well, the mechanic probably is the greatest. He and the Gyro Captain are the biggest sources of comedic relief.
Oh, yeah.
And so here it is, right? This guy has burning gasoline on his hands, and they use it initially as just a comedic beat, but then unfortunately it leads to the demise of the warrior woman.
Right, because she comes to help with 2 crossbows, takes out one guy, and then up comes them with that multiple, dart gun thing, and kills her.
The fact that it's slow and they're smiling when they do it.
And then she's stuck on the barbed wire, and then she's still alive. It's a terrible death.
And the mechanic gets some water and some bag to put out his fire.
And he tries to come help, and then they both get sucked under the wheels.
It's brutal.
It's horrible.
And when this is where I think maybe you're right. There's some relationship between the two of them.
Always thought they had a romantic relationship.
It's definitely a very defensible position, I think.
Max rams another car and sends it off the road.
And it's so funny when you think about it, really, that whole scene on the top of that tanker, it's like a castle battlement scene.
Totally.
But it's but it's moving.
Yeah.
And then there's this moment where one of the cars crashes into another car, and a motorcycle crashes into that car, and the guy flips off the motorcycle. This stunt is, and that's a guy. That's not a dummy.
It's not a dummy. It's a guy going, ass over tea kettle. He does a couple flips in midair. And my understanding is he actually had a pin in his leg from a previous stunt.
No, I didn't know this.
All right, so he had a pin in his leg from a previous stunt. And unfortunately, because of that whole tendency to want to shake everything to get stuff moving, they unfortunately shook it a little bit. So he was supposed to hit it in this certain way and clear it and kind of do what he did. Or I don't think he was supposed to go ass over tea kettle. I think he was just supposed to go hurtling through the air. But because of the movement of the object that he hit, his legs caught on the thing, and that's what made him go. And then the impact of hitting that on that speed with his legs when he crashed in all the boxes, he was essentially fine, and his legs didn't break or anything, but the pin bent just a crazy angle, like just from the impact and stuff. So they did have to take him to the hospital.
Oh God, it's a crazy, because that guy is.
But if you think about what he's doing, it's a relatively minor injury compared to what it looks like.
What it looks like,
yeah,
totally. And now things are starting to go wrong. Guys are shooting out the tires with crossbows. There is one guy who comes up and they're yelling, shoot out the tire, and he gets really close, gets a little too close, gets
he
dragged.
gets sucked under it.
That's another dummy.
I wonder if that's just a little bit of like payback for us, for the audience, since we just saw two people that we like get sucked under tires. It's like, okay, look, we'll throw you a bone. One of the jerks gets sucked under the tires too.
Gyro Captain continues to fly over this, giving us great top-down shots, and he's throwing down more Molotov cocktails. And Max is reloading, and at that moment, Mighty Wes gets back on the back of the tanker. And more guys are climbing onto that tanker. Again, all of these are just live stunts, and of course, they're not going as fast as it looks like they're going, but they're still going fast. And one of the bad guys comes in, sees the feral kid who runs towards Max to get under his protection. And I love that Max grabs him and he's hanging out of the door and picks him up and just drops him on the seat next to him.
Yeah, like a cat by the scruff of his neck.
Exactly. And Max has a guy above him, jumps in, shoots like a crossbow bolt down. Does he hit Max?
I think he does.
I think he does.
Yeah.
And then there's the bear claw guy too that really fucks up.
Oh yeah.
Max,
Yeah.
You know?
Throws the thing onto him.
And Max is about to shoot the guy above him, and then someone comes into the passenger side window, so he shoots him his head instead, then gets the guy in butt him. There's the bear claw guy from behind, and then we have the Mighty Wes in slow motion leap down on the top of the thing.
Then it's coming up. There's that great moment where then finally where we think all is lost for Max, and then when he comes out, spins out, leans out of the side of a moving thing with a shotgun, fires. And that's when the kid goes,
It's so this is why it was so hard for me to write up this down. There's so much happening with this action sequence.
It's crazy.
It's so fast. The shot selection is amazing. The tension is super high, and now Mighty Wes is swinging down with some kind of like Morning Star or something.
Oh yeah.
Just taking apart the cab.
Amazing.
And so what does Max do? He slams on the brakes, sending Mighty Wes off the front of the car.
Right.
So I guess he's gone.
And somewhere in there, the Gyro Captain gets hit by that horrible machine, that shoots the four crossbow bolts. So he goes down, and we get the sense that he crashes, but is not fatally hurt when he's crashed.
It's actually, it all happens right about now, because right now, the Lord Humungus has hit his turbo or whatever it is, his
nitrous injector, yeah.
And he goes forward, smashing his two prisoners into the back of the car, which is mannequins with watermelons with wigs. That's how I did that. And at that moment, and the kid is biting the arm of some guy that's hanging on the side of the thing, and that's when Papagallo pulls up. There's this moment, and one of the things they do really well is we have a lot of driving music, and then the music cuts out at various moments. And the silences are really powerful. We're just hearing sound design.
So good.
And that's the moment where he's gesturing for the kid to come to him. And there's a great look of connection between Papagallo and Mel. And then what happens then?
Gets killed by a trident.
Yep, trident in the back from the Humungus.
The man hurls a trident at another man. Except for, clearly this inspired...
Anchorman?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Thank you.
Killed a guy.
That's just awesome. And
it's the only other major trident before Aquaman.
And now another guy with one of those multi-gun crossbow things takes out more tires, and we're in deep, deep shit. The Humungus is coming up, but we still have the Gyro Captain who drops a Molotov cocktail on him, so he spins out on fire.
Yeah.
And Max now turns the whole rig around, which is a great, great shot of that U-turn.
Oh, yeah.
And now there's still bad guys coming, and the bullets, I should have said this earlier, the bullets have ended up on the hood of the truck.
The shotgun
The shotgun shells. And so what does he say to the kid? Get the bullets.
Get the bullet. Get the bullet.
Because Mel is still attached to the dead bear claw guy, so he can't actually go out on the...
Well, and he's got to drive.
Right, exactly. But he's stuck. He cannot do anything but drive. He can't move in the cabin or anything,
And then again, the music cuts out.
You just hear the wind.
Yeah,
hear the wind.
Completely silent.
And
the heartbeat.
Yeah, and the
hear
heartbeat.
We assume it's the kid's heartbeat.
It is so scary. And again, I look at this and I go, how did they do this? I mean, some of it, I'm sure, is not moving in a moving car.
It's not a kid on a moving car. Like they definitely became expert on just doing the stuff where everything's shaking, everything's moving.
And
they're
there's
blowing
wind
really powerful and stuff.
Because it looks so scary, and he slowly goes out. He's almost gotten the bullets. And, there are things in movies where you go, having watched a lot of movies, I know that's not that guy's not gone. There's going to be another thing. I am certain when I first saw this movie,
yes,
I had totally forgotten.
There's no thought that Mighty Wes is not dead.
Right.
And he pops up, and there's that double cut, and it is so scary. And just at the moment this happens, and Mel pulls forward, rips out of that bear cloak thing, grabs the kid looks up, sees that Humungus has turned on his nitrous and is driving up them. They come over the hill, see him, and then they slam straight into it.
Incredible crash, yeah.
And the car just shatters.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And that big tanker truck flips over on its side and slides through the dust. And I should have said one thing before. Earlier on, you see sand coming out of that tanker truck.
Yep.
Yeah.
As it's getting shot.
Yeah, as it's getting shot. And when you first watch it, you just don't really notice.
Right, it doesn't register.
But then when you watch it multiple times, you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Because now as the
and
tanker...
it's that red sand too,
Yeah.
that that they had out there in some of the scenes where it's like just a very distinctive color of sand,
And then as that tanker truck slides to the stop, that it's opening up and sand is just pouring out of that truck.
Yeah.
And we cut to Mel, on the ground with the kid on top of him, struggling, sliding his way out of the wreckage. And he stands up and he turns around and he looks and sees that sand.
What I love is they play Mel's reaction so slowly in case for all the people in the audience that are still not getting it when you see it come out, and then he puts his hand into the sand, and then we come up and then we get Mel's biggest smile of the movie, where it's like just basically irony is his re-entrance into humanity again, essentially, where it's like he and Gyro Captain kind of share that look of like, oh, can you fucking believe this?
And what's so funny, there's a thing that comes up in my classes all the time where I'm asking a student, like, no, how important is it for your audience to completely understand this thing?
Yeah.
And they'll just have a shot of it. And I'm like, you can't just have a shot of it. You have to have Mel walking up and putting his hand in it is what sells it.
Yep.
Like you can't just show it.
The sand pouring out is for all the smart people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but the whole journey to that is what the entire audience needs for everybody.
Well, and it has emotional resonance, as opposed to just informational.
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost like an echo chamber,
And then we hear our narration come back.
And so began the journey north to safety, to our place in the sun.
And we're not going to have any more. We're not going to sit with Max anymore. We hear that,
the juice, the precious juice, was hidden in the vehicles.
Then we have this panning shot across the bus that kind of bounces along. I love that is not a moving bus.
Right.
That's just a bouncy camera panning that makes it, and then wind blowing to make it appear as if they're moving.
As for me, I grew to manhood. In the fullness of time, I became the leader, the chief of the great northern tribe.
Who are we looking at as we hear that line? Yeah. That is our narrator.
What does he say? What's his last line?
And the road warrior. That was the last we ever saw of him. He lives now, only in my memories.
And that shot.
And the same the shot that we started the movie with.
Yeah.
It is golden hour. Apparently they just, they had the camera on, I'm sure it was a crane, and they went in and they went out and they went in and they went out until one of them was magical. And then that was the one. And that is the end of Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior.
Yeah.
Woo. It was for the budget of the film, it was a decent hit. It's not a huge hit, but it's definitely one of those movies that people rented and watched on TV and watched over and over and over again. And it is just, I think, one of the most influential films in the early 80s.
And I think it had a giant impact. Like every so often a film comes out too where even regardless of its box office, it affects the entire film industry. And so I think
totally.
Mel was suddenly cast in everything throughout the rest of the, he became the in demand. It was just a giant, this guy's a movie star. So for him, it totally changed everything,
It's funny. I know it's this strange category I bring up every once in a while, but I might put this in the list of great movies that ruined Hollywood, because this is the beginning of the nonstop action film. The other movies that we put in this I've put in this are Jaws and Die Hard. and is that films that are so influential.
You should put Raiders in there too, then.
Yeah, Raiders definitely. And we put Silence of the Lambs because that introduced the serial killer that we just go over and
Star
over
Wars.
and over. Star Wars is in the list, and I think this idea
Sounds
is
like a
we
top
can.
10 list he's trying to build there, John.
How many top 10? You know what we should have is the top 10 ideas that Steve Jones came up with in the course of this podcast. I think this is so influential in the idea of nonstop action.
Well, and again, what you would say about all of the things that ruined Hollywood is everyone just took the surface and didn't take the thing that makes it great in the first place, which is that this thing is pure story. It's just all story. Even though it's a story of nonstop action, but every single story beat is about something important and the whole journey of the hero. But then people look at the outside and they just go, well, there's just got to be stuff blowing up and things happening the whole time.
Well, and the storytelling is so crystal clear. And the way that it's all put together is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
John, tell me what your final thoughts are on The Road Warrior.
I would say this. I was happy to revisit this film again for the 1 millionth time for this show and still find that it holds up and it's just as enjoyable. It's almost a combo of nostalgia and appreciation now with the film because it is a young Mel Gibson before all the bullshit.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic sequel to a good beginning film in Mad Max for a series, but one that is nonstop and so much fun and with enough jokes and not laugh out loud jokes, more like kind of calming your stress down jokes that keep you dialed into everything. Because remember, we don't get much backstory on anybody in this film, yet we are immediately drawn to them and connected to them as characters, even though we don't get the standard backstory with them and fallen through this journey. And at the end of the film, we have a different Mad Max. There is an arc here from where we started, and you see it more and more, I think, as you get older, because when you're younger, it's all about the action. When you're older, you're like, okay, what have I been here before, and what was my crazy drive with a tanker trucker through my own demons to get to the other side and remember who I am. And that's fantastic about the film. Not to get too deep, but that's what's so great about the film. And if you haven't watched it in a while, because sometimes you all listen to us without having watched the film or not having watched it in a long time, do yourself a massive, massive favor. Go back and watch it again. You'll be surprised about what you get out of it.
For me, the thing that's interesting to me is I watched it over and over and over again after it came out and rented it all the time. And I had a videotape at one point. Is it watching it this time, what interested me the most was just the craftsmanship and the storytelling. Was that it is so crystal clear in terms of everything that you're supposed to understand when you're supposed to understand it, and even to the point of things being somewhat mysterious, like when Max and the Gyro Captain first get to that hill, it's like, no, Max is trying to figure out what's going on, and we are trying to figure what's going on. It is a really beautifully crafted film, and I think in terms of how it is shot and how the action sequences are put together, it is such an influential movie on us today. And so that's why I kind of go like, this is a great movie for filmmakers to study, in addition to being a really fun action movie with a great star and just thrilling sequences. What about you?
Absolutely. I mean, going off of some of the stuff you guys just said, like John talks about backstory, and I think in all four of the films, something George Miller just does masterfully is that there's almost no time spent on any exposition. And this is the only one, there's a slight exception because of Mad Max 1 being there where we have that little bit of setup, but none of the other films have that setup. We just start, and it's because he builds such a logical world where everything about every character relates to the world that he's building that it just makes sense. It doesn't need to be explained, So I think that's an amazing thing. I remember loving this movie so much as a young guy, and almost going like, when you're young, especially when you're a young male, you're just like, oh, almost thinking it would be cool if the world went this way or whatever. And I think the big difference between being a young man and an older man is I feel like when you're a young guy, you're like, oh, wouldn't the Road Warrior be cool? And
be awesome.
Then when you're older, you're like, then you realize post-apocalypsism is the road, not the Road Warrior. It's with Viggo Mortensen.
Oh yeah,
it's like,
God, yeah.
And so as soon as I became a parent, it changed how I love this film. And then and now I spend every day just hoping, please let society not fall apart, because I don't want to have to be Viggo Mortensen and that Australian kid just teaching him how to stay alive, But I think
I think it's a masterpiece. I mean, in terms of it's so well crafted. George Miller is so goddamn good, and especially, right? I mean, it's the amazing thing of before Mel and all the crazy shit that he's done and all the trouble he's had. It's always, that would be another fun top 10 list. Like the film, the film that catapulted. Took a burgeoning star and made them a star.
That's a good one. Yeah.
There's
top 10 star making films.
Yeah, exactly. Like Junebug for Amy Adams or something like that. Like there's one where it's like some actor emerges from that thing, and it's like, holy crap, we gotta watch this person.
Yeah.
But I think, and it's so great. Like you said, the nostalgia fact. I feel like when you think about Fury Road.
Yeah.
Because when you think about, I love Spielberg and the stuff that he's done, or you think about Lucas come back with Star Wars, the fact that George Miller came back 35 years later and maybe made the best of the four in a way, and made a film that's, I mean, some people have called one of the greatest action. That's just, it's ridiculously incredible, and there's really no other example. I mean, maybe Kubrick in his 70s.
Right, at an older age. Right.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone.
Yeah.
Because, Kubrick with Eyes Wide
Kurosawa,
Shut.
there's still, everyone
maybe.
fantastic. There's some great stuff, but there's nothing like coming back with that kind of tour de force work.
That kind of time.
Well, and Spielberg doesn't do the kind of movies he did when he was young.
Yep.
No.
Most filmmakers...
6 years from now, please have me on for Fury Road. Once you break your 10-year rule.
No, we've already talked about. I can't wait to do that movie.
Yeah,
that movie is insane.
That's like three episodes.
I think that movie is such a fuck you to the young directors of oh, you think you're directing an interesting movie? Check this out.
Right.
It is so insane what he does in that film.
What I love about it, as we know, everyone on the film didn't think Fury Road was going to be any good. I mean, Tom Hardy and Charlize both apologized to George Miller in that Cannes Film Festival.
Oh, really?
And I ended up talking to some stuntmen that worked on that film, and they all thought that it was going to be crap too. This was like a year and a half before it came out. They're like, "Oh, mate, he's lost it. It's not going to be any good." Like everyone thought that he'd gone crazy, but it turns out it's
6 years from now, it's a date.
All right, thank you. Thank you guys for having me on. I love this movie.
It was great to have you. So I think that's what we think of Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Of course, we always want to hear what you think. You could visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files, CINE. Don't forget the dash, FILES. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. That's the best place to do it. But if you really want to subscribe to us on YouTube, that's the best place for you to do it. Leave us some reviews on iTunes. Leave us comments on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Google Play and a whole bunch of other places. You could support the show and, just like Wayne Edwards, get one of your picks done on the Cine-Files at patreon.com/the Cine-Files. As always, you could reach me on Twitter at SRMorris, on Instagram at SRMorris1. John, where can they reach you?
You can find me with a gasoline at the Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram.
And Mr. Jones, if people wanted to reach you.
I'm Stephen B. Jones. That's STEPHENBJONES on Instagram. And please come find me on Instagram, or come listen to the 3 Days of the Condor.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic episode.
We want to stay number one.
Steve, as always, it was great having you on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you guys for having me.
And I think that's it for this week. We will see you next time on the Cine-Files.